He was left under a broken flag, wearing a tag that said he had already died. The rain came down hard along the Oregon coast that night, cold enough to make the blacktop shine like glass and quiet enough to make every forgotten thing look guilty. At the edge of a closed rest stop 12 miles north of Newport, the old flagpole groaned in the wind. A torn American flag snapped against the darkness, its stripes soaked through, its stars folding and unfolding like tired eyes. Beneath it, where the roof of the abandoned fuel station sagged over a cracked concrete pad, a white German shepherd lay curled beside a rusted ice machine. His fur should have looked bright, almost silver under the security light, but the rain had pressed it flat against his ribs and turned it gray at the edges. Mud clung to his paws. Pine needles stuck to his tail. One ear stood up with stubborn discipline while the other tilted slightly, as if even his body could no longer decide whether to stay on duty or finally surrender to sleep. Cars passed on Highway 101. Headlights swept across him, then vanished. Tires hissed through shallow water. Engines faded into the wind. No one stopped. The dog did not chase them. He did not bark. Somewhere, long ago, someone had taught him not to waste sound unless it mattered. So he waited beneath the broken flag, breathing slowly, watching the road with amber eyes that had not yet learned how to quit. Around his neck hung a narrow chain, darkened by rain and salt air. At the end of it rested a service tag, scratched and bent at one corner, tapping softly against the concrete each time his chest rose. The sound was small. Tick, 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 like a clock counting down for a life the world had already filed away. A paper coffee cup rolled past him and caught against his front paw. He lifted his head an inch, sniffed it, then let it go. His nose twitched at every scent the storm carried. Diesel from the highway, seaweed from the inlet, wet cedar from the tree line, old gasoline soaked deep into the pavement, and something faint beneath it all. Human absence. That smell had weight. It was in the empty windows of the store, in the locked restroom doors, in the pay phone with no receiver, in the food bowl someone had once left nearby but never filled again. The white K9 knew the difference between being lost and being left. Lost had panic in it. Left had silence. He had been silent for a long time. A gust of wind pushed rain under the awning and across his muzzle. He blinked but did not move. His legs trembled now and then, not from fear exactly, but from the effort of staying awake. There was an old stiffness in his left shoulder, the kind that made standing a negotiation. Still, when a truck slowed near the entrance, his body remembered training before his hope did. His head rose. His eyes sharpened. His front paws pressed against the ground. For half a second, under that failing yellow light, he looked like what he had once been. Not a stray, not a burden, not a ghost story told by passing drivers, but a working dog, a soldier's shadow, a creature built for purpose. The truck rolled on. Red taillights blurred behind the curtain of rain. The dog lowered his head again. The service tag tapped the ground. Tick, tick, tick. Across the lot, the broken flag cracked once in the wind, loud as a command. The dog flinched. Not much, just enough to show that somewhere inside him, memory was still alive. A low whine slipped from his throat before he could stop it. He looked toward the dark windows of the convenience store, then toward the road, then back at the flag. No handler called his name. No whistle cut through the storm. No familiar boot step approached the concrete. Only rain. Only wind. Only the steady passing of people who had somewhere warmer to be. But the white K9 stayed facing the highway. Maybe because loyalty does not understand abandonment at first. Maybe because a dog trained to return will keep looking for the person who never came back. Or maybe because, in some quiet place beyond instinct, he still believed one set of headlights would slow for the right reason. Near midnight, the security light buzzed and flickered. For one long second, the whole rest stop vanished into darkness. The dog disappeared with it, swallowed by rain and shadow. Nothing visible except the faint metal glint beneath his throat. Then the light came back on, weak and yellow, and there he was again. Still breathing, still waiting, still wearing the tag that should have ended his story before anyone had the chance to read it. Caleb Brooks almost did not see him. The rain had turned the windshield of his old Ford pickup into a moving wall of silver, and the wipers dragged across the glass with a tired, rubbery groan. He had been on his feet since before sunrise, unloading crab traps and repair crates at the Newport Marina, The kind of honest work that left salt in his beard and stiffness in his hands. 42 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet, and still carrying the posture of a man who had once learned to sleep with one eye open, Caleb drove like someone trying not to think. The heater clicked weakly beneath the dashboard. A paper cup of gas station coffee sat untouched in the holder, gone cold 2 miles back. Outside, Highway 101 bent along the coast, black and wet, with the Pacific somewhere beyond the dark, breathing against the rocks. Caleb kept both hands on the wheel. His skin, deep brown under the dim dashboard glow, caught flashes of passing light whenever another car swept by. A faded navy sweatshirt clung damply to his frame beneath an old canvas jacket. Around his neck, hidden under the collar, 2 dog tags rested against his chest. He rarely took them off. Some men kept photographs. Caleb kept metal. Metal did not ask questions. Metal did not change its voice. Metal stayed cold until your body taught it warmth. He had passed the closed rest stop many times on late nights like this. Most locals knew the place by sight and forgot it just as quickly. A dead fuel station. A cracked lot. A torn flag no one had bothered to replace. It was the kind of place people used for directions, but never for stopping. Caleb was already beyond the entrance when something pale caught in his side mirror. Not white exactly. More like a piece of moonlight trapped beneath the awning. His eyes flicked up. For a moment, the reflection blurred. Rain. Concrete. Rusted ice machine. Then the shape lifted its head. Caleb kept driving. His jaw tightened, and the truck carried him another 50 yards down the highway. He told himself it was probably a stray. He told himself animal control would handle it in the morning. He told himself he had no room in his life for another wounded thing that might not make it. Then the mirror caught one last flash as the rest stop slipped behind him. A small glint at the dog's throat. Not a collar buckle. Not a tag from some neighborhood yard. Caleb knew that shape. He knew the way military identification metal sat flat against the neck, plain and practical, made not for beauty but for proof. His right foot eased off the gas before he had decided to move it. The pickup slowed. Behind him, a semi-truck rolled past with a deep rush of water and wind. Caleb pulled onto the shoulder, sat still for 2 breaths, then closed his eyes. He did not pray often, not because he had stopped believing, but because some prayers felt too much like opening sealed doors. When he opened his eyes again, he shifted into reverse, backed carefully along the empty shoulder, and turned into the abandoned lot. The headlights washed over the cracked concrete and found the dog beneath the awning. The white German shepherd did not run. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. Most strays scattered from headlights, from engines, from doors opening in the rain. This one stayed low, eyes fixed, body trembling but disciplined. Caleb killed the engine. Silence fell hard. Only the rain remained, drumming on the hood, whispering along the roof, ticking against the broken sign that still promised ice and coffee to people who no longer came. He stepped out slowly, boots splashing in a shallow puddle. The cold hit his face. The dog watched every movement. Caleb raised both hands, palms open, and stopped 15 feet away, close enough to see the dog clearly now. Male. Adult. Leaner than he should have been. White coat dulled by road grime and weather. Ears alert despite exhaustion. Eyes amber. Bright with the kind of intelligence that could break a man's heart if he looked too long. Caleb lowered himself to one knee on the wet concrete. His left knee complained, an old injury from a jump he never talked about. He ignored it. Easy, he said, voice low and steady. I am not here to take anything from you. The dog's lip lifted, not in anger, but warning. Caleb understood that, too. Pain often speaks before trust does. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wrapped turkey sandwich he had meant to eat after work. He opened it slowly, tore off a piece, and set it on the ground between them. The dog sniffed the air but did not move. Caleb did not push. He looked away just enough to give the animal dignity. That is all right, he murmured. You do not have to trust me fast. The flag above them snapped in the wind. The dog flinched. Caleb saw it. Something old moved behind his ribs. He had seen men flinch that way at fireworks, at dropped trays, at doors slammed by mistake. He shifted closer by inches, never standing over the dog, never reaching for the neck. The service tag swung faintly, catching the headlights again. Caleb's breath slowed. Letters, half hidden by rain, marked the metal. Not enough to read. Enough to matter. You were somebody's partner, he whispered. The dog's ears twitched at the word. Partner. Caleb felt the night change around him, as if the whole empty rest stop had been waiting for that one word to be spoken. He removed his canvas jacket, the cold biting through his sweatshirt immediately, and spread it open across his forearms. The dog gave a low sound from deep in his chest. Caleb stopped. I know, he said softly. I know what it is like when hands come too late. The dog stared at him. Rain ran from the awning in silver ropes. Out on the highway, another car passed without slowing. Caleb stayed on one knee, soaked and patient, until the white K9 lowered his head by a single inch. Not surrender, not trust, only permission to try. Caleb did not reach for the tag right away. He had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose trust was to take hold of the one thing a wounded soul still believed belonged to him. So he stayed low on the wet concrete, jacket open across his hands, his breathing slow enough for the dog to count. The white K9 watched him without blinking. Rainwater slipped from the edge of the awning and struck the ground between them in steady drops. Caleb could hear every one of them. He could hear the highway behind him, the distant groan of a truck climbing the coast road, the soft metallic tap of that tag against the dog's chest. Tick, 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 a sound too small to belong to a night this heavy. Caleb shifted the piece of turkey closer with 2 fingers, then drew his hand back. The dog lowered his nose, sniffed once, and paused as if waiting for permission from someone who was not there. Then he took the food gently, not like an animal desperate enough to forget manners. Like a trained dog receiving a ration from a handler. Caleb felt something tighten behind his throat. That is it, he whispered. Good boy. The words barely left his mouth before the dog's eyes changed. Not much. Just a flicker. A memory passing under the surface. Caleb wondered how many times he had heard those words before. In a kennel. On a pier. Near the engine noise of a transport aircraft. In a field somewhere, with a human voice steady above him and a job waiting in the dark. Caleb tore another piece from the sandwich and set it down. This time, the dog reached for it sooner. His front leg trembled as he moved, and Caleb noticed the careful way he kept weight off his left side. Not broken, maybe. Not fresh. Something older. Something ignored too long. Easy, Caleb said again. You are doing all right. The dog chewed, swallowed, then lifted his head. The service tag swung forward, clear for 1 second in the truck's headlights. Caleb saw the first line. Atlas. The name struck the air between them like a bell. The dog froze. Caleb froze with him. Atlas, Caleb said softly, testing the name as if it were fragile. The dog's ears came up, both of them now, sharp despite the cold. His chest rose once, deeper than before. Caleb had not guessed. Caleb had read. But the dog did not know that. To Atlas, the sound of his name in a human voice must have felt like a door opening in a house he thought had burned down. Caleb swallowed hard. So that is who you are. Atlas did not move toward him, but he did not back away either. Caleb leaned just enough to see the tag again. The rain made the stamped letters shine and vanish. Shine and vanish. He could read the second line in pieces. Naval. Special. Warfare. His fingers went numb, and not from the cold. He knew those words. He had lived under their weight. He had seen men stand straighter when they heard them and go quiet when they understood what they cost. This was not a lost pet from a beach town. This was a working dog from a world Caleb had spent years trying to leave behind. He shifted closer, inch by inch, and Atlas made a low rumble in his throat. Caleb stopped immediately. I am not touching it, he said. Not unless you let me. The dog watched him, eyes bright under rain-dark lashes. Caleb slowly turned his own dog tags out from beneath his sweatshirt and let them hang where Atlas could see. The small silver pieces caught the yellow security light. They rested against Caleb's chest, worn smooth at the edges from years of skin and sweat and restless sleep. Atlas sniffed the air. His posture changed again, almost too slight for anyone else to notice. But Caleb noticed. Soldiers notice recognition before civilians notice movement. See, Caleb murmured. I carried metal too. The words were simple, but something in them loosened the night. Atlas leaned forward just enough to smell the tags from a distance. His nose twitched. Caleb held still. The dog's gaze traveled from the metal to Caleb's face, searching him with a seriousness that felt almost human. There was no begging in that look. No easy trust. Only assessment. Is this man safe? Does he know the rules? Will he leave? Caleb did not smile. Some moments did not need a smile. They needed truth. I almost kept driving, he admitted. His voice dropped lower, nearly lost beneath the rain. I am sorry for that. Atlas blinked slowly. The broken flag cracked overhead. Caleb waited until the dog's body settled, then moved his jacket a few inches closer. Cold night, he said. Probably 38 degrees by now. Too cold for you to be on concrete. Atlas looked at the jacket, then at Caleb's hands. Caleb spread his fingers, empty palms up. Another car passed out on the highway, throwing white light across the lot. For one sharp second, Caleb saw the last line of the tag. 3 letters and 1 word. Killed in action. Confirmed. The breath left him. He leaned in before he meant to, not touching, only staring. The rain blurred the letters, but not enough. Atlas. Naval Special Warfare K-9 Unit. Killed in action. Confirmed. Caleb's mouth went dry. The dog in front of him was alive. Thin, soaked, exhausted, but alive. His breath steamed faintly in the cold. His heart moved under wet fur. His eyes held Caleb like a question no official report could answer. Caleb sat back on his heel, the storm suddenly farther away and closer at the same time. That is impossible, he whispered. Atlas lowered his head, as if the word had weight. Caleb looked toward the dark store windows, toward the empty road, toward the broken flag above them. Someone had written this dog out of the world. Someone had stamped an ending onto a life that was still breathing. The old part of Caleb, the part trained to read silence for danger and paperwork for lies, woke up behind his ribs. He reached for the jacket again, slow as prayer, and this time Atlas did not growl. Caleb draped the canvas lightly over the dog's shoulders. Atlas flinched at first, then stilled under the warmth. His eyes remained on Caleb. Caleb nodded once, not to comfort the dog, but like a man accepting orders he never expected to receive again. All right, Atlas, he said. Let us find out who buried you while you were still alive. Caleb did not lift Atlas the way people lift a wounded animal when they are frightened by urgency. He moved with the patience of a man handling something sacred. First, he opened the passenger door of the pickup and pushed aside an old canvas tool bag, a coil of rope, and a folded wool blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and engine oil. Then he came back into the rain and knelt beside the white K-9 again, letting Atlas see every motion before it happened. We are going to do this slow, he said. No surprises. Atlas watched him through wet lashes, his body stiff beneath the jacket, his breathing thin but steady. Caleb slid one arm under the dog's chest and waited. Atlas made a warning sound, low and tired. Caleb stopped at once. He did not pull away. He simply held. Still, offering the strength without taking the choice. I know, he murmured. Nobody gets to grab you anymore. That sentence seemed to settle over both of them. The rain softened for a moment, or maybe Caleb only stopped hearing it. Atlas's eyes searched his face. Then, little by little, the tension in the dog's shoulders loosened. Caleb slid his other arm behind Atlas's hind legs, careful of the sore left side, and lifted. The dog was lighter than he should have been. Too light for a working German shepherd. Bones under soaked fur. Heat fading under cold rain. Caleb clenched his jaw and rose with him, the old ache in his knee flaring as he stepped across the slick concrete. Atlas trembled in his arms, but did not fight. His head turned once toward the broken flag, as if checking whether he was allowed to leave his post. Caleb followed his gaze. The flag cracked in the wind above the empty lot. Your watch is over, Caleb whispered. You hear me? You are relieved. Atlas made the smallest sound then, not a bark, not a whine, something between a breath and a memory. Caleb placed him gently on the passenger seat, spread the wool blanket around him, and tucked the canvas jacket along his side. Atlas's service tag rested against the blanket, dull and wet, the stamped words still visible in flashes whenever the dashboard light caught them. Killed in action. Confirmed. Caleb shut the door carefully and walked around to the driver's side. For 3 seconds, he stood in the rain with both hands on the roof of the truck. He looked back at the abandoned station, the rusted pumps, the cracked windows, the useless flagpole. The place already looked empty again, as if it had never held a breathing secret beneath its roof. But Caleb knew better. Some places keep what people try to throw away. Some places wait for the right witness. He got in, started the engine, and turned the heater high. Warm air coughed from the vents. Atlas lifted his nose toward it, uncertain, then lowered his chin onto the blanket. Caleb pulled on a Highway 101 and headed south toward town. The nearest clinic open after midnight was Harper Veterinary Care, a small emergency practice tucked behind a bait shop and a closed pharmacy near the marina. Caleb had seen the sign before, but never had reason to stop. Tonight, every mile felt longer than it should have. Rain streaked sideways through the headlights. The ocean appeared and vanished beyond the guardrail, black and restless, its white edges breaking against the rocks far below. Caleb kept glancing at Atlas without turning his head too much. The dog did not sleep. That worried him. Exhausted animals usually surrendered to warmth if their bodies believed they were safe. Atlas stayed awake, eyes half open, tracking the road, the mirrors, Caleb's hands, the dark beyond the windshield. Trained even in ruin. Loyal even with no command left to follow. "You can rest," Caleb said softly. "I have got the road." Atlas's ear moved at his voice. Nothing more. At the clinic, the parking lot was nearly empty except for a blue Subaru and an ambulance-style animal transport van. A light glowed over the glass door. Caleb pulled close to the entrance, came around, and opened the passenger side. Atlas tried to stand before Caleb could help him. His front paws slid against the blanket. His left shoulder dipped. Caleb placed a steady hand near, not on him. "No pride tonight," he said. "Let me carry the heavy part." This time Atlas allowed it faster. That small permission struck Caleb harder than the cold. He gathered the dog into his arms and pushed through the clinic door with his shoulder. A bell chimed above them, soft and ordinary, as if the world had not just shifted. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic, warm towels, wet fur, and old coffee. Behind the counter, a woman in navy scrubs looked up from a laptop. She was in her late 30s, with dark blonde hair tied back and kind eyes made serious by long nights of seeing fragile things arrive too late. Her name badge read Dr. Emily Harper. The moment she saw Caleb holding the white German Shepherd, her expression changed. Not panic. Recognition of urgency. She moved from behind the counter without asking for paperwork. "Exam room 2, she said. "Right now." Caleb followed her down a short hallway lit by fluorescent bulbs that hummed above framed pictures of rescued dogs and thank you cards from families. Atlas's tag tapped once against Caleb's wrist. Dr. Harper heard it. Her eyes flicked down, but she said nothing yet. In the exam room, Caleb laid Atlas on a padded table covered with a clean blue towel. Atlas tried to lift his head, alert even now. Dr. Harper approached slowly, speaking to him before touching him. "Hello, handsome. My name is Emily. I am just going to help you breathe easier tonight." Atlas washed her hands. Caleb stood at the table's edge, one palm resting near the dog's paw without trapping it. Dr. Harper checked his gums, listened to his heart, felt along his ribs with careful fingers, and frowned at the old marks hidden beneath the wet fur around his neck. "Dehydrated," she said quietly. "Undernourished. Some older strain in the left shoulder. No fresh major trauma that I can see, but he has been through neglect. Maybe confinement." Caleb's eyes went to the tag. He was under the old rest stop flag north of town. Dr. Harper gently moved the fur aside near Atlas's collar line. There were faint impressions there, not dramatic, but enough to tell a story of something worn too tight for too long. She looked at Caleb. This dog did not wander there from someone's porch. She reached for a towel and began drying the white fur around his neck. A small strip of dark fabric came loose from the matting near his shoulder and fell onto the table. Caleb picked it up with 2 fingers. It was weathered, stiff with salt and rain, but the pattern was unmistakable. Military-grade nylon. Not from a leash sold in a store. Dr. Harper studied it, then the tag. "May I?" she asked. Caleb looked at Atlas. The dog's eyes stayed on him. Slowly, Caleb nodded. Dr. Harper turned the service tag just enough to read it under the exam light. Her face went still. "Caleb," she said, though he had not told her his name. Then she glanced at the old dog tags hanging from his neck and corrected herself softly. "Sir, this says he was confirmed dead." Caleb looked down at Atlas. The white K9 breathed against the towel, alive beneath the light, alive beneath the words stamped to erase him. Caleb touched the edge of the table, steadying himself. "Then somebody wanted the world to stop looking for him," he said. Atlas closed his eyes for the first time since the rest stop. Not fully, just enough to let the room hold him. And in that quiet clinic on the edge of the Oregon coast, With rain ticking against the windows and a broken tag lying under clean light, Caleb felt the old shape of duty return. Not loud, not heroic, just clear. Dr. Harper moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent too many nights bargaining with fragile heartbeats. She wrapped Atlas in warm towels, started fluids through a small shaved patch near his front leg, and placed a soft oxygen line close enough to help without frightening him. The white K9 watched every movement, but his eyes no longer held the sharp edge of panic. Caleb stayed beside the table, one hand resting near Atlas's paw, never forcing contact, only offering presence. The clinic hummed around them. Machines breathed in low electric rhythm. Rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere in the back room, a dryer turned with a steady thump, warming blankets for animals who had arrived cold from other lonely places. Dr. Harper checked Atlas's temperature and frowned, then tucked another towel along his side. "He is colder than I like," she said, "but his heart is strong." Caleb nodded once. It was the kind of answer he trusted. Not cheerful, not final, just honest enough to stand on. Atlas's service tag lay on the steel tray beside the table, clean now with a gauze pad so the letters showed plainly under the exam light. Atlas, Naval Special Warfare K9 Unit. Killed in action. Confirmed. Caleb could not stop looking at it. There were lies people spoke because they were afraid. There were lies people wrote because they wanted to be believed. And then there were lies stamped into metal, sent into systems, archived in silence, so that a living soul could disappear without anyone needing to look him in the eye. Dr. Harper followed his gaze. "Do you know anyone who can verify that number?" Caleb took out his phone, then hesitated. The screen reflected his tired face back at him. For years, he had kept his old contacts buried, like photographs in a drawer. Men from the teams. Men who knew what not to ask. Men who understood that some nights, survival felt less like a blessing and more like unfinished paperwork. "Maybe," he said. Dr. Harper looked at him carefully. "Maybe is better than nothing." Caleb scrolled until he found a name he had not called in nearly 8 months. Sheriff Daniel Reeves. In town, people knew Reeves as the tall, silver-haired sheriff who wore polished boots and still opened doors for elderly women at the grocery store. Caleb knew something else. Reeves had spent 22 years in the Coast Guard before taking the badge, and he had a patient way of reading a room that came from storms, not politics. Caleb pressed call. It rang 4 times. A tired voice answered. "Brooks, it is after midnight." "I know." Caleb looked at Atlas. "I need you to run a service identification number." Quietly, a pause settled on the line. Not confusion. Attention. "Military." "Yes." "Yours?" Caleb swallowed. "A dog's." The silence changed again. Reeves did not laugh. Good men rarely laughed when they heard the tone behind a strange request. "Read it to me." Caleb gave him the number from the tag, slow and exact. Dr. Harper held a clipboard but had stopped writing. Atlas breathed beneath the towels, his chest rising in a shallow rhythm, his paw a few inches from Caleb's hand. Reeves repeated the number once. "Give me 10 minutes. Dan, yes." Caleb's voice dropped. "The tag says confirmed, killed in action." Another pause. "And the dog is with you. He is breathing right in front of me." Reeves exhaled through his nose. "Stay where you are." The call ended. Caleb set the phone on the counter. Dr. Harper resumed her work, cleaning the mud from Atlas's paws with warm water and soft cloth. Beneath the grime, the pads were worn and tender, as if he had traveled farther than any town map could explain. She found old scars hidden in the white fur, not dramatic, not needing description, just small records of service written where no uniform could cover them. "He is trained," she said softly. "Not just basic obedience. Look at how he tracks the door every time someone moves in the hallway. Look at his breathing when your voice changes. He is reading us." Caleb looked down. Atlas's amber eyes opened halfway, fixed on him. "He has been reading people longer than some people have been worth reading." Dr. Harper almost smiled, but it faded when Caleb's phone vibrated. He answered before the second buzz. "Brooks." Reeves's voice came through lower now. "I found the number." Caleb closed his eyes. "Tell me." K9 Atlas. Attached to a Naval Special Warfare Support Unit. Listed deceased 3 years ago after an overseas recovery operation. Handler listed as Chief Petty Officer Mason Cole. The name moved through Caleb like cold water under a door. He opened his eyes, but the clinic blurred for a second. Mason Cole. A voice from another life. A man with a crooked grin, a calm hand, and a habit of checking on the dogs before he checked his own gear. Caleb heard him as clearly as if he stood in the room. Nobody gets left behind, Caleb. Not even the dog. Dr. Harper saw Caleb's face change. What is it? Caleb did not answer yet. Reeves continued. There is more. The file says both Cole and Atlas were lost during the same operation. Recovery incomplete. Records sealed after review. Caleb stared at the white K9 on the table. Atlas was awake now. Fully. His eyes were on Caleb, and something in them felt less like recognition than waiting. As if the dog had carried the name all this way and had finally placed it in the right hands. Caleb's fingers tightened around the phone. Mason sent me a message before he vanished from the stateside roster. Caleb said, mostly to himself. 4 words. I thought it was a mistake. Reeves was silent. Dr. Harper stood still beside the table. The rain at the window seemed to quiet. Caleb looked at Atlas's tag, then at the dog. Watch the white dog, he whispered. Atlas lifted his head 1 inch from the towel, weak but certain, and for the first time since the rest stopped, his tail gave a single faint movement beneath the blanket. Not joy, not relief. Recognition. Caleb felt the room grow smaller around the 3 of them. The doctor, the dog, and the man who had almost driven away. Mason had not sent a warning into the past for nothing. Atlas had not survived 3 years of being erased only to end up under a broken flag by chance. Caleb set the phone down slowly. Dr. Harper, he said, his voice steady now in a way it had not been all night. Whatever happens next, nobody takes him from this clinic unless I am standing there. She looked at the dog, then at Caleb, and nodded. Then we keep him warm, she said. And we keep him safe. Atlas lowered his head again, but his eyes stayed open, fixed on Caleb as though the old chain of command had found its missing link. The clinic settled into the kind of silence that comes after midnight, when even the walls seem tired of holding bad news. Dr. Harper moved Atlas to a recovery kennel lined with warm blankets, leaving the door open enough that he could see Caleb in the chair beside him. The oxygen line rested near his muzzle. The fluid bag hung from a metal stand, dripping with the patience of rain. Outside, the storm kept pressing its fingers against the glass, but inside the small room there was heat, low light, and the faint smell of clean cotton. Caleb had taken off his wet sweatshirt and now sat in a dry clinic hoodie that Dr. Harper had found in a storage cabinet. It was 1 size too small across the shoulders, but he did not notice. His eyes stayed on Atlas. The white K9 had not fallen fully asleep. Every few minutes, his ears shifted toward a sound in the hallway or the hum of the refrigerator in the treatment room. His body was exhausted. His training was not. Caleb understood that kind of tired. The kind that lived deeper than muscle. Dr. Harper entered quietly with 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed one to Caleb. It is terrible, she said, but it is hot. Caleb took it with both hands. Hot is a blessing. She leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. Sheriff Reeves is checking what he can without waking the wrong people. He said he will come by before dawn. Caleb nodded. He stared into the coffee without drinking. Steam rose between him and the memory he had spent years refusing to invite in. Mason Cole had been the kind of man who made danger look less lonely. Not fearless. That was a word people used when they did not know any better. Mason knew fear well enough to respect it. He joked with medics, remembered birthdays, carried extra socks for younger men who forgot to pack them, and spoke to working dogs as if they were junior officers who deserved proper briefings. Caleb first met him on a joint training rotation in Virginia, years before the night that split Caleb's life into before and after. Mason had been kneeling beside a white German Shepherd pup with paws too large for his body and ears that had not yet learned discipline. The pup had stolen a glove from an instructor and sat on it like evidence. Mason looked up at Caleb and grinned. This one is going to be trouble. Caleb remembered asking, that his name? Mason scratched the pup behind one ear. Not yet. I am thinking Atlas. Big name for a dog that steals gloves. Big job holding up a man's world. Caleb had laughed then. A real laugh. Easy. Careless. The kind that belonged to someone who had not yet learned how quickly a world could fall. Years later, on Caleb's final deployment, Mason and Atlas were already a team. The dog had grown into his name, tall and powerful, white coat bright against dust and shadow, amber eyes fixed on Mason with a devotion that made ordinary friendship look thin. Atlas did not move like other dogs. He measured everything. Doorways, hands, breathing, silence. Mason said Atlas could hear a lie before most men heard a command. Caleb did not know if that was true, but he had seen the dog stop at thresholds no one else questioned and refuse paths everyone else thought clear. He had also seen Atlas lay his head on a young sailor's boot during a long flight home, holding the man steady through a panic he would never have admitted out loud. That was what people forgot about working dogs. They served in ways no report could fully name. Caleb closed his eyes, and the memory shifted to a stateside morning after everything had changed. He was in a military hospital in California, his ribs wrapped, his hearing still strange on one side, his future packed into folders. Mason had visited wearing civilian clothes and an expression too calm to be casual. Atlas was not with him. That had bothered Caleb immediately. Mason never came without the dog unless something was wrong. "Where is your shadow?" Caleb had asked. Mason had glanced toward the hallway before answering. "Being held for review." Review of what? Mason had not smiled. He had placed one hand on Caleb's bed rail and leaned closer. "Some paperwork is starting to smell rotten." Caleb remembered the fluorescent light buzzing above them. The taste of hospital ice. The way Mason's voice dropped when he said, "If anything ever sounds wrong about me, do not believe the first version." Caleb had tried to sit up. Pain stopped him. "Mason, what is going on?" But Mason only shook his head. "Not here." 2 days later, Caleb received the message. For words. "Watch the white dog." After that, Mason's number stopped working. Then came the official notice, quiet and clean and final enough for everyone who wanted clean endings. Lost during an overseas recovery operation. Atlas listed the same. Caleb had been too injured, too angry, too tired of chasing ghosts through locked doors. So he had accepted what the paper said, because sometimes a lie becomes easier to carry when grief has already filled both hands. A soft sound pulled him back. Atlas was watching him from the kennel, eyes open in the dim room. Caleb set the untouched coffee aside and moved closer, lowering himself onto the floor. His knee protested, but he stayed there, level with the dog. "I should have looked harder," he said. Dr. Harper remained by the counter, silent enough to honor the confession. Atlas's gaze did not accuse him. That almost made it worse. The dog simply breathed, slow and steady, as if he had been waiting years not for an apology, but for someone to remember the right name. Caleb reached through the open kennel door and placed his hand palm up on the blanket. Not touching, offering. For a long moment, Atlas did nothing. Then his nose moved forward, cold and damp, and rested against Caleb's fingers. A small contact. A fragile bridge. Caleb bowed his head. The room blurred. He did not make a sound. Some men cry like storms. Others cry like stone taking water, quietly, one hidden place at a time. Dr. Harper turned toward the supply shelf, giving him the mercy of privacy. Atlas kept his nose against Caleb's hand. Outside, thunder rolled far over the ocean, softened by distance. Caleb breathed in once, then again. When he finally looked up, something in his face had changed. The old guilt was still there. It would not leave in one night. But beneath it stood something steadier. Purpose. Mason trusted him with the truth, Caleb whispered. And somehow, Atlas brought it back. The dog's ears lifted at Mason's name. Caleb saw it clearly. Not a twitch. Not chance. Recognition. Atlas knew the name. He remembered. Caleb touched 2 fingers gently to the blanket beside the dog's paw. "Then we do this right," he said. "No running. No hiding. No more letting a file decide who gets remembered." Atlas exhaled, long and tired, and for the first time that night, his eyes began to close. Not because he had given up, because someone else had taken watch. By 4:15 in the morning, the rain had thinned to a mist that clung to the clinic windows like breath on glass. Atlas was asleep at last, not deeply, not safely enough to dream without listening, but asleep in the way soldiers sleep when another soul has promised to stay awake. Caleb sat on the floor beside the open kennel with his back against the wall, one hand resting palm up near the blanket. Atlas's nose remained close to his fingers, close enough that Caleb could feel the faint warmth of each exhale. Dr. Harper had stepped into the front office to update charts and call in a second technician for the morning shift. The hallway lights were dimmed. The little treatment room held a chapel kind of quiet, machines glowing softly, towels folded in a neat stack, the service tag lying on the counter beneath a small desk lamp. Caleb kept looking at it. The clean metal no longer seemed like evidence. It seemed like a testimony. A living thing had carried proof through neglect, weather, fear, and distance, waiting for one person who could read not only the letters, but the lie beneath them. Caleb had just closed his eyes when Atlas stirred. Not much. One ear lifted, then both. His body went still with a suddenness that made Caleb open his eyes before any sound reached him. The dog was awake now, amber eyes fixed toward the hallway. Caleb did not move. He listened. At first there was only the old building settling, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant hiss of wet tires passing outside. Then came the bell above the front door. One light chime, too gentle for the way Atlas reacted. Caleb rose slowly, his joints stiff from the floor, and stepped to the treatment room doorway. Dr. Harper's voice carried from the lobby, polite but guarded. "We are not open for regular intake until 7. A man answered her. Smooth voice. Controlled. "I understand, doctor. This is not regular intake." Caleb moved silently down the hallway until he could see the front room through the narrow gap beside a supply shelf. The stranger stood near the counter in a dark raincoat, water beading on the shoulders. He was about 50, clean-shaven, with gray at the temples and the kind of calm face that made refusal sound unreasonable. In one hand, he held a leather folder. In the other, a phone with the screen already lit. "I represent a private military canine recovery contractor," he said. "We received a notification that a government property animal matching an archived identification number was located here tonight." Dr. Harper did not take the folder. "That was fast." The man smiled without warmth. "Our systems are efficient." Caleb watched his hands. Always the hands first. The stranger's fingers were steady, nails clean, wedding ring absent, right wrist half hidden beneath the cuff of his coat. Dr. Harper folded her arms. "The dog is medically unstable. He is not being moved. I appreciate your concern." He placed the folder on the counter. "But you are not authorized to retain him. This paperwork allows immediate transfer." Dr. Harper looked at the documents without touching them. "Paperwork has not impressed me tonight." For the first time, the man's expression tightened. "Only a little." "Enough. Doctor, I am trying to prevent complications for you." Behind Caleb, Atlas made a sound so low it seemed to begin in the floorboards. Caleb turned. The white K9 was standing. The fluid line had enough slack for him to rise, but his body trembled with the effort. His eyes were not confused now. They were locked forward, bright and hard, focused beyond the hallway, beyond the voice, on something memory had already named. Caleb stepped back into the room. "Atlas," he whispered. "Easy." But Atlas did not look at him. The dog took one careful step out of the kennel, then another. Caleb reached for the fluid line to keep it from pulling, moving beside him instead of stopping him. Dr. Harper heard the movement and glanced down the hall. "Caleb." The stranger looked too. The moment his eyes found Atlas, everything in the clinic changed. His polite face remained in place, but his body gave him away. One breath held too long. One small shift of weight toward the door. One hand lowering toward his right cuff. Atlas saw it and growled again, deeper this time. Not wild. Not loud. Certain. Caleb looked at the stranger's wrist as the cuff slid back. There, across the skin, was a pale crescent scar shaped like a fishhook. A memory opened in Caleb with frightening clarity. Mason at the hospital. His voice low. "Some paperwork is starting to smell rotten." Then another memory, older, from a briefing room where a name had been spoken once and dismissed too quickly. A contractor liaison. A man Mason had not trusted. A man with a scar on his wrist from an old boat accident. Caleb stepped fully into the lobby. The stranger's eyes moved from Atlas to Caleb's dog tags, then to his face. Recognition passed between them, thin and cold. "Mr. Brooks," the man said. Caleb did not ask how he knew his name. That answer stood in the room already. "You came a long way before sunrise," Caleb said. "For a dog your paperwork says does not exist." Dr. Harper's gaze hardened. The stranger closed the folder slowly. "There are classified matters involved. You would be wise not to interfere." Atlas moved beside Caleb, weak but upright, the white fur along his shoulders lifted. Caleb placed one hand low near the dog, not holding him back, only letting him know he was not standing alone. "A friend of mine told me not to believe the first." version, Caleb said. I should have listened sooner. The stranger's calm began to thin at the edges. Outside, headlights turned into the lot, slow and deliberate. Blue and red reflections washed faintly across the clinic window, not flashing, just present. Sheriff Daniel Reeves had arrived without sirens, the way a man arrives when he wants truth more than noise. The stranger glanced toward the lights. Atlas gave one sharp bark, the first Caleb had heard all night, and the sound cracked through the lobby like a door breaking open. Not an attack, not fear. A signal. Reeves stepped inside, rein on his hat, badge on his belt, eyes moving once across every face. Morning, he said calmly. Seems like I got here right on time. The stranger straightened. Sheriff, this is a federal matter. Reeves looked at the folder on the counter, then at Atlas, then at Caleb. Maybe. He removed a small notebook from his coat. But abandoned animals inside my county are a county matter until someone proves otherwise. And right now, the only living witness looks pretty sure he knows you. Atlas stood breathing hard beside Caleb, but he did not lower his gaze. The service tag glinted from the counter behind them, no longer just a record of being erased, but the one piece of truth nobody in that room could bury again. The night pressed against the clinic walls, a slow drum of mist and leftover rain sweeping across the small windows. Atlas stayed close to Caleb, his body taut with alertness, amber eyes following every movement. Caleb's fingers rested lightly on the blanket beside the dog, offering reassurance without imposing it. The stranger in the lobby shifted, restless under the silent command the dog seemed to wield without words. Caleb's gaze never left Atlas. Easy, he whispered. The dog exhaled slowly, a small plume of moisture in the dim light. Outside, the headlights of the sheriff's truck illuminated puddles and streaks of fog on the asphalt. Reeves had stepped in without fanfare, the kind of arrival that did not announce itself, but was always noted. The stranger looked at him, weighing options that were no longer his alone. Atlas lowered his head slightly, then raised it again, following the subtle shift in Caleb's posture. Every inch, every gesture was a conversation. Caleb leaned down and whispered, "We make our own decisions now." Atlas tilted his ears, the sound of metal tags tapping softly against each other as he shifted closer to Caleb. Reeves spoke then, calm and deliberate. "Mr. Brooks, this dog belongs to no one in the room right now except the one standing beside him." The stranger's hand lingered near the folder, but the authority had passed. Caleb rose fully, standing between Atlas and the lobby, eyes steady, voice quiet but firm. "We are going to stay here until morning," he said. Atlas gave a faint movement of his tail, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge understanding, not submission. Dr. Harper returned, checking the monitors and adjusting the blankets around the dog. The room smelled of warmth, antiseptic, and wet fur. Caleb kept his hand extended just above the blanket, letting Atlas decide if contact was welcome. The dog inched closer, placing his damp nose on Caleb's fingers, a small gesture of trust earned, not demanded. Outside, the storm had lost its urgency, but a faint wind still whispered against the walls. Caleb's chest rose and fell with measured breaths. He thought of Mason Cole, of the message, of the time when loyalty and training had intersected with the unpredictability of human decisions. All of that distilled into this moment, here and now, a quiet command that the dog had given and Caleb had recognized. Reeves watched silently from the doorway, the badge at his belt reflecting dim light, the posture relaxed but aware. The stranger finally stepped back, folding the leather folder slowly, acknowledging defeat without acknowledgement. Atlas's head lifted, eyes meeting Caleb's, a subtle nod in amber that seemed to say the night's trials had been understood and that the bond being re-established was real. Caleb bent slightly and whispered again, "It is safe now. You are not alone." Atlas exhaled, a long and steady breath that relaxed shoulders that had been tense for years. The tag on his neck caught the glow from the desk lamp, the letters glinting faintly. Naval Special Warfare. Atlas. Killed in action. Confirmed. Alive. Caleb looked at the metal, then at the dog, then back at Reeves, then at Dr. Harper. The room held still for a long moment, filled only with quiet breathing, faint hums of machines, and the low rhythm of the heater. Atlas lowered his head onto the blanket, curling slightly, but keeping his eyes open enough to follow every subtle motion of Caleb's hands. Caleb exhaled and sank onto a chair beside the kennel, hand hovering near the dog, letting Atlas dictate the distance. Outside, the wind and rain had diminished to a soft whisper, the fog rising from the asphalt like a tide. The first light of dawn began to tinge the horizon with muted gray and blue, casting gentle shadows across the clinic. Caleb glanced at Atlas and murmured, "We are going to make sure no one ever erases you again." Atlas pressed a paw lightly against Caleb's hand, steady and deliberate, acknowledging both the promise and the responsibility. Dr. Harper adjusted the blankets one final time, eyes flicking between Caleb and the dog, knowing that this was more than a medical recovery. It was a reclamation, a quiet but absolute restoration of a bond and a life nearly forgotten. Reeves nodded once to Caleb, understanding the resolution, then moved toward the front desk, leaving the two of them in the small, warm room that smelled of towels, faint antiseptic, and the certainty of loyalty restored. Caleb sat back, letting the tension ease just enough to breathe, Atlas at his side, eyes attentive, both waiting for the day to begin. Together, neither abandoned, both aware that some nights decide more than any paperwork ever could. Morning arrived slowly, pale and quiet, filtering through the clinic windows with a softness that made every shadow tremble. Atlas had shifted slightly in his blanket, laying his head on Caleb's knee, eyes half closed but alert enough to track the subtle movements around him. Caleb sat in the chair beside the kennel, back straight, hands hovering gently above the dog, letting him dictate the closeness. Dr. Harper moved around the room with calm efficiency, checking vital signs, adjusting blankets, and refilling a small dish of water. She glanced at Caleb and Atlas with a faint, approving nod, recognizing the bond that had been re-established, delicate yet firm. The service tag lay on the counter, gleaming in the morning light now, letters clear. Atlas, Naval Special Warfare, killed in action, confirmed. Caleb stared at it, a deep breath filling the room, knowing that the dog beside him was living proof that the truth had a way of coming back, no matter the time lost. Reeves had stayed for a moment, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his hat, then nodded and retreated to the front office to make necessary calls, leaving the small room filled only with quiet machinery hums, the faint smell of wet fur and warm towels, and the rising sun washing the walls in gold. Caleb reached down and brushed Atlas's ears softly, whispering, "You are safe now. No one can take this from you." The dog pressed closer, resting his head fully against Caleb's knee, a signal of trust, surrendering not to fear, but to the promise of protection. Outside, the streets were wet and reflective, the mist rolling from the ocean in gentle waves, carrying the smell of salt and cedar. Caleb rose slowly, hands still resting near Atlas, and moved to the counter to gather the service tag. He held it close, feeling the weight of years, of absence, of lies, and the quiet redemption that had brought it back into the right hands. Atlas watched every motion, tail sweeping lightly across the blanket, a gentle rhythm matching Caleb's breath. The dog's chest rose and fell steadily, marking each second as one of survival, of reclaiming what had been stolen by official records and oversight. Caleb turned and looked at Dr. Harper. "We will need a long-term plan," he said softly. "For him." She nodded. "He needs consistency, warmth, and someone who understands his history. He will thrive if given both." Caleb exhaled and returned to the dog, laying the service tag on the edge of the blanket where Atlas could see it, metal glinting in the first light of day. The dog lifted his head briefly, eyes catching the reflection, amber flickering, then rested again, trusting completely. Caleb gently rubbed his shoulder, murmuring, "You carried what was taken from you, and now we carry it with you." Outside, the mist shifted, thinning along the coast road, the sound of early traffic a quiet hum in the distance. But inside, the room was still, filled only with the soft rise and fall of a loyal dog breathing and a man learning to bear the weight of his own past. The first rays of sunlight broke through the blinds, illuminating the small clinic in pale gold, dust motes floating like tiny reminders of time passing and still standing. Caleb bent closer to Atlas, voice barely above a whisper. "We will start over, together. No one erases us again." Atlas exhaled, a long, slow breath, and Caleb let his hand rest fully on his neck now, palm open, fingers splayed, as the dog leaned into him, every movement deliberate, calm, and full of trust. The room held this quiet for several minutes, the morning rising steadily around them, wrapping them in warmth that came from presence, not power, from choice, not circumstance. Caleb watched Atlas. Atlas watched him, and in that silence, both felt the weight of the past lift, replaced with the steady promise of a life rebuilt side by side, each heartbeat marking a vow kept, each breath shared a quiet miracle recognized. As outside, the Oregon morning continued its slow ascent, fog retreated.